Hello and welcome to the Institute of Advanced Studies. I'm Ksenia Shmutina, Director of the IIS, and today we are hosting Dr. Amrita Jash with us, who will be talking to us about all exciting things, kind of China and current affairs and where it's going to get us. Quite a big topic, really, but as always in the IIS, we host conversations that really matter, conversations that are really important, and normally quite a good discussion afterwards. So please, for those of you in the room, those of you online, I encourage you to ask questions, and we will have time in the end to ask questions. A couple of housekeeping rules. So questions is one. The second one, we are recording the presentation. It's a hybrid seminar, but the Q&A will not be recorded. And the presentation will be published on our YouTube channel and a podcast shortly after, because Kieran just does his magic and it appears there somehow. You will also all get the link. Well, without any further ado, I would like to ask Ali to introduce our IS fellow today. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Ksenia. Welcome, Amrita, first of all. Dr. Amrita Jash is an assistant professor at the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations at the Manipal Academy of Higher Education, MAHE, short version, in Manipal, India. She holds a PhD in Chinese Studies from JNU. And before joining Manipal, she was a research fellow at the Center for Land Warfare Studies, New Delhi. Dr. Jash was a Pavata Fellow at the University of Cambridge, and she has been a visiting fellow at the Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Cambridge, a UGC graduate fellow, a researcher under the Harvard Yanqing Nanjing program, a researcher under China's Minister of Commerce, and US India China Initiative Fellow at SAIS, Johns Hopkins University in 2013. She has authored Chinese Japan Policy, Learning from the Past, published in 2023, and the Concept of Active Defense in Chinese Military Strategy, Pentagon Press 2021. Her research interests are China's foreign policy, Chinese military, security, and strategic issues related to India, China, and China-Japan relations and the Indo-Pacific. Welcome, Amrita. We look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to each one of you. At the very outset, I'm going to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Institute of Advanced Studies for hosting me, and to Professor Ali for being my academic coordinator for this opportunity at IIS at Loughborough University. Now, without further ado, I'd like to begin my talk. This is an academic venture that I undertook, taking a slightly plunging into something little more interesting, because I largely looked into China's military modernization and Asia per se, but this area, which is still an very rarely studied, not much has been studied, but this deems a lot of attention in today's time. And as you are all aware of the current context, that since the Israel-Hamas conflict, the war, the way the tensions are unfolding in Middle East, and we are seeing the influence, that is the established American influence and the rising Chinese influence in the region. And that's where the broad contextualization lies for me. Now, while as I was doing my study, I would like to reflect upon or bring to your notice, why is it important to study Middle East, especially in the current times? And I tried to figure out some interactions that China was having, specifically from 2022 onwards, that we see a sudden uptick in China's engagement. And that's where I chronologically put it, like you're all aware of Chinese President Xi Jinping. This was his visit to Saudi Arabia in December 2022. And that led to the establishment of the China Gulf Cooperation Council Summit. So China's interest was very much established, and this was one framework that took precedence. Immediately after that, what followed was February 2023. That's when then Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi he visits Beijing, and it was his first state visit by any Iranian president in last 20 years to China. And the outcome, as we very well each one is aware of, on 10th of March, we see the unprecedented rapprochement happens. That is China brokering a peace deal between two strategic rivals, that is Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is unthinkable. Once it was, brokered, there was a lot of anticipations that this peace is only temporary, but today we are seeing that peace has lasted. Rather, the Abraham Accords, which was presided by US, that has been nullified given the Israel-Hamas conflict. So we see the rise of China and Chinese way of making peace, so Chinese interest in brokering peace in this region. So this marked a major shift in China's role, specifically in engaging into a more proactive diplomatic role in Middle East with in relation to settlement or stability and making peace. This was something new as well as for China. And immediately after that, on 8th November, when we see the Hamas attack on Israel, China's position since then is very interesting. China has said that, as I quote, the fundamental way out of the conflict lies in implementing the two-state solution and establishing an independent state of Palestine. This is completely taking a departure or an antithesis to the Western position on the issue. So, unlike the West, we see China taking a departure in its standing. Rather, it has not outrightly condemned Hamas, which the West did, or many other states did, but instead it stated that condemn acts that harm civilians. So, till date, China has not condemned the Hamas attack or taken name. And immediately after that, this is a very special setup that China has done. China has special envoy format. It does it with Africa, and it has established this with Middle East. No other countries have this kind of setup. And with Middle East, 2004, that it came up with this format. And after 8th October, we are seeing a series of visits by the special envoy, that is Chai Chun, where he visits Qatar, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, the key states which are surrounding where the turmoil is happening between in Israel. So, and this was a major interest that China pitched to the world in terms of its assertion of playing a constructive role, or rather an important role in the resolution of the Gaza conflict. After that, on 30th November, China again setting a new precedent, release a first position paper. No other countries has done. It has done that with Russia-Ukraine conflict as well, the only country to come up with a position paper. And in that, it titled it as Resolving the Palestinian-Israel Conflict, calling for, as I quote, an immediate ceasefire and ending the fighting, ensuring that the humanitarian corridors are safe and unimpeded, and preventing the expansion of the conflict. This was the position that China took. Now, the Israel-Hamas conflict has a spillover effect into the Red Sea crisis, where we are seeing that the cargoes were attacked by the Houthis, the Yemeni rebel group. And China again took a very interesting stand, even in this. So when we are seeing the attack from December 2023, China's first in 14th January, after that, in 2024, it issued a joint statement with the Arab League. And again, it did not condemn the Houthis, just like Hamas. It didn't name the Houthis, didn't condemn it. Rather, both the parties, they expressed their concerns. And again, underscored the paramount importance of upholding, rather, Yemeni sovereignty and territorial integrity. Again, a very different position. So what was found that China has major stakes in the region in Red Sea, given its seaborne trade. However, China acted as a bystander, and the clue lies the Houthis. There was some kind of a tacit agreement that, no ships or embargo of the Chinese embargo will be attacked by the Houthis. So there was a clear understanding. Otherwise, we have seen that, how the US, the EU, UK, everyone got involved in countering the Red Sea crisis against the Houthis. After that, on 24th Jan 2024, the Chinese ministry issued a statement where it stated that we are deeply concerned, a very normal position, a very obvious position, but it stated that we call for an end to the disturbance to civilian ships and urge relevant parties to avoid fueling the tensions in the Red Sea. Here, there was a direct hint to the West, rather, because US, UK, and EU launched attacks, counterattacks against the Houthis. And specifically, in one of the press conference, the Chinese Foreign Ministry, in addressing a concern of a journalist, Reuters journalist, China stated, China is a sincere friend of the countries of the Middle East and is committed to promoting regional security and stability and seeking common development and prosperity. We firmly support Middle Eastern countries in strengthening their strategic independence and uniting and collaborating to resolve regional security issues. So nothing could have been more clearer than that what position China took. It clearly stated we are friends of the Middle Eastern countries and they have the right to settle their disputes without any external involvement. And in March 2024, again, China called for support of Palestine's full membership into the United Nations. 23rd July, China held this very important, it held reconciliation talks of Palestinian factions. And the Beijing Declaration came into being, which was called Ending Division and Strengthening Palestinian National Unity. Again, you can't have this kind of involvement or, this close contacts where, China is encroaching into, especially getting all the factions which are, divided amongst themselves under one roof and coming up with a Beijing Declaration. Something unthinkable, but Beijing could do it. And the consensus they reached three consensus, that is affirmation of the PLO as a sole legitimate representative of an all Palestinian people. Secondly, agreement on establishing an interim government of national reconciliation, focusing on post conflict reconstruction of Gaza. So, already they were thinking what to do after the Gaza conflict, but as we see, it is an ongoing one. And thirdly, call for establishing an independent state of Palestine in accordance with relevant UN resolutions. Now, given this consensus, automatically you feel when you pitch it against the West, China looks far more appealing to the Middle East, given concerns, it is giving autonomy, it is raising the rights of the people, it is harping on, it's a people's cause. So it's a total 180-degree, different stance that China is projecting to the world or to the Middle Eastern countries against the Western, standard position that has been there. And just to add on to it, as you're aware of the BRICS, again, a regional grouping of the emerging economies. And in 2023, August 2023, China extended an invitation amongst other countries like Argentina, Ethiopia. It extended invitation to four Middle Eastern countries, that is Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, to become members of the BRICS. And in January already, Egypt, Iran, and UAE has become the member states that is under BRICS Plus. Saudi Arabia is yet to join in, but I think so that will soon unfold. So what does it suggest when we see this chronology? These are like rapid events in very less time, crucial times, and we are seeing China's engagements and the way China has been received by the states is very important. So I would like to argue or that China's inroads into the Middle East is not by default, but by design. We might see that, the situations is maybe the timing is just perfect, and China is good at taking, capitalizing on the crisis, making the crisis into an opportunity. Now, I draw it from the argument of famous American expert, the Stephen Walt, who came out in his articles, that is in Foreign Policy in 2023, Saudi Iranian detente is a wake-up call for America. And his emphasis point was a wake-up call for America, why he says that China's efforts to present itself as a global peacemaker is something that, with this, it is replacing the role that US largely held for all these years. And now US, you ask, majority in the United Nations, that image of US is slowly getting replaced by China as a much more formidable player or, much more promised player this region. And very interestingly, I also draw from India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, where he stated in one of his observations, it's quite, apt. He said, as I quote him, for the last 20 years, the United States has been fighting but not winning in the Middle East. And China has been winning but not fighting in the Middle East. China anyway believes that, you fight, you win without fighting. Apply all those psychological tactics. It has a famous three warfare strategy where you tap into the psyche. You have, legal warfare, every other thing that comes into play, other than, just using hard power. You have other ways of building your clout, and China has been able to excel in this art of war, where it is winning but not fighting in real terms. But for US, just the opposite. So I say that in vouching for its role, now in every statement by China, you'll say China says China wants to play a constructive role, be it in Russia-Ukraine war, any crisis. This constructive role is the moot point that China endorses for itself or sees itself. But why is it saying constructive role? That's what I would like to say, that China has been positioning itself as an alternative to the United States, because it's saying that how United States has not been able to play that constructive role in any of the conflict situation, though taking stakes as one of the responsible player. And I draw it from the, again, a position paper that China came out in 2023, first of its kind, where it says, which was titled US Hegemony and Its Perils. And outrightly, categorically, without mincing any words, it says US has acted more boldly to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. So it outrightly declared that US is the culprit. That was the word well used. And this came in the context of the Russia-Ukraine warfare. It was just immediately after that. And just, unfolding after this, we are seeing the turmoil in Middle East. So how do we then contrast? While what Beijing is doing is also, kind of intervention, but it likes to call United Washington's mediation as interference, and like to defend itself as non-interference. Because I'll come back to it, why I'm saying. It says we are providing good offices. This also came as their legit position. If you look into the joint declaration of the Saudi-Iranian peace deal, the word providing, that Beijing provided good offices for this, you know, rapprochement to take place. So China is very good with words, and it's very interesting if you can do how China decodes. Words are very critical when you understand China's foreign policy or strategy, how it wants to project itself as something different from the West. So, therefore, it's important as well as imperative to understand, or why I am uh, trying to present this study to this audience, that China's growing influence in the Middle East, in contrast to United States' long-held dominance in the region. That's where one needs to pitch the case. Now, what are the major trends that I've seen in China's engagement with the Middle East? Now, know that in Middle East, I'll start with the key partners in the region, that is Saudi Arabia, Iran, and UAE are the key partners for China in the region. Now, based on this, what are the key trends? The first trend that comes, that is obvious, is economic expansion, of course. And how is China doing it? Firstly, trade with Middle Eastern countries. China today is the major trading partner with most countries in the world. So Middle East is not an exception in any which way. Trade, what follows trade is investments. So that comes hand in hand, and investments specifically in energy, infrastructure, technology. And you're all aware of Belt and Road Initiative under Xi Jinping, which has, given a further which acted as a catalyst in terms of China's investment projects abroad. Now, when I correlate it with Middle East, how do you see the trade? The trend. Trade between Middle East vis-a-vis US has been on a declining trend. So declining when I'm saying from US dollar 120 billion in 2019 to 82 billion. There's a sharp decline. On the similar front, when you see China, the trade has only upticked and from 180 billion to 259. Just see the folds in which it has grown. Short span, very big jump. So clearly, who has replaced US as, of course, an obvious winner is China. Second, the trade with Middle East, when we say as a share of total Chinese goods, is higher, almost 7.95% in 2022. So then again, an uptick in that. China's investments are mainly in terms of constructions, and I try to get the figures of each country where I see Saudi Arabia with 43 43 odd billion dollars, UAE with 36, Iraq with 30, Kuwait 11, Qatar with 7.8, Oman 6.6, and finally Bahrain with 1.42. Mostly the GCC countries are there. The FDI, the foreign direct investment stock, also has increased from 28.2 billion to that of 31.5 billion, so 12% increase. So overall, when you see the broad picture, China is actually has ticked all the markers of being in terms of trade and investment and replacing US in Middle East as a formidable partner in a very short time. Now, this is an investment graph. What, as I said, BRI has been a catalyst. It is Middle East is very critical to China's BRI, and the mega projects that China is leading in terms of BRI. Saudi Arabia, one of the major, Chinese involvement in Saudi Arabia in terms of infrastructure and development is coming from China. So building this, modern cities, or that's Neom City, Saudi Arabia's entire setup of King Abdulaziz International Airport, Dubai Al Maktoum Airport Phase 2, and Qatar Integrated Rail Project. These are some of the keys that I have taken. Apart from this, you have other major Chinese projects where port activities, be it Khalifa Port expansion, Oman China Industrial Park, Cairo Capital CBD project, Tehran Isfahan high-speed railways. Apart from this, China is a major investor in Oman's Dokam port, which is a very strategic, port, and there are direct interest, or where India's interests also lie, especially in Dokam. After coming from the trade, what the other thing that gets to the picture is the diplomatic activity. I started with that, and here I see it as an established trend. How do you see China in Middle East? Now, China has a non-interference policy. That's a standard in principle. China's foreign policy position is this, and where it will say, I don't interfere. What I do is I focus on your economic over military engagement. Just the opposite of United States. I don't put my head into your troubles, and it avoids any kind of entanglement in others' disputes. So it takes a very, safe position and remains neutral, and it has been in advantage for China. Therefore, it could partner with Iran and Saudi Arabia at the same time, and those two countries didn't look eye to eye. And then the same country could bring them together and strike a peace deal. In 2016, as China, again, it comes out with the first Arab policy paper, and where it clearly states, as I quote, guiding principle for developing China-Arab relations, offers the blueprint for China-Arab mutually beneficial cooperation, and reiterates the political will of commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East in order to promote China-Arab relations to a new and higher level. So with this, you can see that, there is a total, uh, the reiterance of respect, or I respect your territorial sovereignty, I don't interfere in your matters. It's quietly, it's well projected in China's, let's say, how it treats its parties, which is mainly on, it says win-win to be another key word, or I treat you at equals with me. So, we are not, uh, it's not a zero sum game that is followed. The spillover effect of this has to be on the trends that, China's engagement. Firstly, when you maintaining stability and avoiding involvement in internal affairs. When the Arab Spring happened, China didn't provide any overt support to either democratic movements or regime change. So again, it's a winning card for China, unlike when we contrast it with the West. Mediation efforts in regional conflicts, rather it says that, providing good officers, and Saudi Iran rapprochement, the most unthinkable rapprochement has happened and is sustaining itself. And third is political ties with the GCC countries, which is Iran, Egypt. So China, when I started off, the Xi Jinping visit to Saudi Arabia led to the establishment of China GCC framework, and that's where the interest lies. China. The third trend is limited military involvement. I China does have, but in a very different capacity, which is non-combat roles, right? And how the way China is involved in firstly UN peacekeeping missions. So you have UNIFIL, which is in Lebanon, and if you see the role that Chinese forces are involved in, are very interesting. So it's again providing engineering or logistical support as observers. So be it in UNIFIL in Lebanon or UNTSO in Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and then UNDOF in Syria-Israel border, that is again military observers, of which in UNIFIL is the most visible presence of Chinese peacekeeping force, and which is mainly in terms of logistics. And the other two is mainly that is UNTSO and UNDOF are mainly involved in smaller contingents, mainly looking at ceasefires, providing that observance in terms of ceasefire. Now, from peacekeeping, the other main goal is arms sales. Now, China's major arms sales goes to Pakistan, and but Middle East, there's a trend. What kind of arms? So Saudi Arabia and UAE are the key recipients, and today China is actually the kind of technology, mainly drone technology, is what China is exporting to these two countries, and China is assisting Saudi Arabia's first drone factory. So completely China hand in building the Saudi Arabia's drone factory. Iran, Egypt, Jordan, they have taken Chinese missile systems and surveillance technologies. So technology becomes key when we talk about arms sales, and drone becomes the main, key component of it. Now, why does arms sales to these countries appeal? Why the Chinese? Because unlike the West or the United States in particular, China does not impose political or human rights conditions on arms sales. So, it's an attractive supplier. So, and the cost also becomes quite handy. Third way is training of local security forces in Qatar and UAE. I think so. It will unfold in other countries as well. Naval presence in Djibouti, and counter-piracy operations in Gulf of Aden, maritime exercises, especially with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and land base with Jordan and Egypt. So all of it, when you say China doesn't appear to be a military threat to the Middle East, right? Which is again a strong counter to the US presence in the Middle East or the West presence in the Middle East. And this is more interesting. Of all the obvious trends, I was doing a study, and this is where I found what is a new trend, this Chinese migration in the Middle East. Often we'll see that where does the overseas Chinese population diaspora, largely we'll say Southeast Asia, which is an obvious answer, North America and Europe. But what I found is China has a significant migrant population on an increasing trend in the Middle East, which needs an attention. And to come up with, of all the Middle Eastern countries, it's the UAE that hosts the largest Chinese expatriate population with more than 3 lakhs Chinese nationals. And this figure is on the increasing trend. And it is also one of the largest single country communities in the UAE. We might think, Indians would like to think we are there, but the study found that is the Chinese who are the single country dominant. And this is followed by, it just doesn't stop at UAE, of course, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and other countries like Iran, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, which follows after that. But UAE is the prime. What are the outcomes? How do you see, how does migration involve or affect your geopolitics? Interestingly, we are seeing that there's a wider acceptance of Mandarin language. Well, English is very obvious. How do you see my influence? So that's where I studied. Mandarin is now, a potent language or a foreign language which is most acceptable in these countries, which in major leading educational systems. Country like Saudi Arabia is the first country in the Middle East to make learning Mandarin mandatory in both public and private secondary schools. And UAE has included Mandarin as an elective from kindergarten to secondary curriculum. So you're already infusing, the Chinese, how China is getting entrenched into your cultural fabric or socio-cultural fabric. Then Chinese School Dubai, 2020, it came into being the very first Chinese full-time public school, catering to, of course, its expatriates, but also having a presence matters. We don't have, apart from some American schools, you're seeing a Chinese, this is a big, departure or a contrast from the Western influence. Then 2014, this is another interesting takeaway. China launched the first Dragon Mart, a retail complex, world's biggest Chinese trading hub anywhere outside mainland China. So Chinese companies that are getting hosted. And 2014, it already, just immediately after uh, uh, Xi Jinping launched its BRI in 2013, and he takes into power as president in 2013, as a party general secretary in 2012. In 2022, a total, the other, trend that I found was number of Chinese contract workers that has increased, and that is now estimated to be at 53,000 people, because the projects, the amount of investments and infrastructure projects, the skilled labor is coming from China. So this is the same thing that we found in Sri Lanka. I visited Sri Lanka, port city that is coming up. It's mainly Chinese workers who are, building the Chinese port. It's not the local citizens. So that's also a trend of how you're getting your own people or the Chinese citizens for your own projects. Now, based on these drivers, based on these trends, I try to match what are the drivers that is influencing China's investments or engagement, sorry, in the Middle East. At the foremost, of course, is energy security, because China is a net importer of oil and natural gas. So it's heavily reliant or dependent on this region for oil and gas imports. So Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran, and as a rising power, which is and also an aspirational power, development is the first goal, and for that, energy security becomes at the foremost agenda. So in 2017, we see that the trend says that China surpassed the United States to become the world's largest crude oil importer. And after that, in 2023, the amount specifically which comes from Iraq was at the higher trend. That is 99% of the dollar value of China's imports from Iraq, and at the lower end, especially with LNG, accounted for 69% of dollar value for China's imports from UAE. So both the Middle Eastern countries are figuring in China's matrix. In 2023, again, China imported a record high of 11.3 million barrels per day of crude oil. That is 10% more than 2022, with Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq as the key source of crude oil import. So after Russia, it's only Middle Eastern countries, and even to that Saudi Arabia replaced Russia in its oil imports. In August 2022, Aramco, that is Saudi Arabia's biggest or national oil company, it signed a MOU with its Chinese counterpart, that is Sinopec, and other joint ventures which China is engaged in with Saudi Arabia are with Fujian Refining and Petrochemical Company with Sinopec, and Sinopec Senmei Petroleum Company in China with Yanbu Aramco Sinopec Refining Company. So these are major investments and major joint ventures that China is having with major oil companies in Middle East and specifically Saudi Arabia. So apart from energy security, what adds to China's ambitions in Middle East is its Belt and Road Initiative because investments are a big part of it, and this is a magnanimous, project that China, a country like China, has dared to give to the world, which no one could think of connecting Asia to Europe to Africa, and when it was initiated, again anticipations were raised that this is not going to get fructified. But over time, we're seeing that the Belt and Road Initiative has taken incremental steps and has gotten shaped itself and has enhanced in China's footholds in the region, specifically in Middle East and Africa. When you say so, Belt and Road Initiative in this Middle East is a key link to China's global trade, and Saudi Arabia is a core partner in China's BRI in Middle East. Then comes geopolitical ambitions. For everything said and done, why is China doing so? Obvious answer is counterbalancing United States influence in the region. Because whom is China competing against is the United States. China wants to replace the United States as the core influencer or that US led world order that or international order, because China wants to have a multipolar world order where China is having major stakes in that world order that China is wanting or aspiring to have. And in that process, it is building alliances with emerging powers to support its multipolarity. So expansion of BRICS is one of them. So its interests, intentions in Middle East is very much part of its multipolar world vision that China is envisaging. So be it Africa, be it Middle East, these regions are pivotal for shaping that multipolar viewpoint, which is again a strong counter to the US-led liberal international order that China wants to replace. And lastly, market access. Of course, where do you expanding its trade partnerships, strategic partnerships, and reach in order to access its regional consumer markets. And all the more, after COVID, this has become very important given its slackening economy. Having that large market is very important for China, and China is trying to, build its strength in those areas. So, what implications does it hold to this? The obvious ones is shift in the power dynamics, because what was so long a US, influenced region, today we are seeing an Asian power which is emerging, or in some way has emerged in some forms in some quarters as a key player in a traditional Western dominated region. So we don't see any other, powers, be it European. I'm talking about when it's saying you had American influence getting replaced by an Asian or rather Chinese influence in the region. So, yeah, so it's a big shift. When we say that power politics is shifting from the west to the east, this is also one of the avenues that one needs to look into. Then economic realignments, that is strengthening ties between China and Middle East. China has been able to sell its China model to these countries because what China tries to propose that it is not its way of trade is not about the Washington consensus, but rather Beijing consensus where you have a win-win situation. China today talks about shared community. So that's become like, selling point China that when we build with China, it's always going to be win-win. That is like the policy or the way China sells it. And lastly, impact on US influence. So the question remains that has China been able to replace US in the Middle East? While it yet not completely, but it has already made inroads to uh, the region, and China is not shying away from it. Today's China is confident. It doesn't shy away. It's not saying that, I have to wait for 30 years, bide my time, and hide my abilities. Rather, it's confident to pitch that I have the what is needed to have an influence in the region, and which is a direct challenge to US dominance in the region's both energy and security landscape. So when we see China's growing clout, it's obviously it poses a direct and a significant challenge to America's long held position in this region, be it political or diplomatic influence. Uh, because when China, just to add, China has introduced various initiatives, of which one is Global Security Initiative, where it is saying that Chinese offering Chinese solutions to regional problems in the world. We don't know what that means, but in that process, it is coming out where the Saudi-Iran deal was one of the exemplars of where China is saying that this is a Chinese solution to the existing problems which US has not been able to solve. And finally, China is expanding foothold in Middle East, which will only increasingly challenge US supremacy and has the ability to play a bigger role, which is already intending and in somewhat playing a bigger role in maintaining the stability and political dynamics of the region, as testified by the Saudi-Iran deal. Thank you so much for your patient listening. So I would now.